Greetings, everybody, and welcome once again to the Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Fredland. As the leader of a small business, you're easily consumed by the chaos of spinning too many plates. You need content that's curated specifically for you. You need connections with other small business owners to share insights and share perspectives. You need engagement from experts to give you practical steps to move forward. You need a community specifically designed with you in mind. This is who we are, and this is what we do. Welcome to the small business community. If you're not already part of the community, join us at smallbusiness.com. Check it out, and you can take us for a free test drive. Get the content, connections, and coaching that you need to move from chaos to confidence. All right, with that, let's get into today's discussion. All right, guys. Well, today we are joined by Lisa Zawrotny. She's an expert in the area of simplicity, which I think is a super intriguing thing to be talking with small business owners about because, you know, if anything, owning a small business is absolutely complex. So talking about simplicity, I think is super interesting. So Lisa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you inviting me.
Now, are you in New York now?
I am in New York now, near the Finger Lakes area.
So when we talk about simplicity, let's start with, you know, what is the problem that's solving? Like before we talk about simplicity, let's talk about the problem. What is the problem? What's going on? Why do people need to pay attention to what you have to say?
Well, I think for starters, there seems to be this, which I believe is a misunderstanding, that complexity makes something more valuable. And I think especially for small business owners, and I am one, so I get this, we immediately want to go for something that is complex, thinking that it is going to be the answer. That, I think, is the first problem. And then the second part of that equation is that when it's complex, we take more time than we need to. So we're losing time, and time is money. Yeah. And then also it can keep us from really achieving it, because when something is too complex, either we struggle with it and we don't actually achieve it, or we can struggle to keep it as a habit. And that's probably one of the biggest things for me is when you go simple, you can develop proper habits. And habits are 40 to 45% of what we do every single day. So when we establish habits, we can rule our lives beautifully, and we can leverage it that way.
So what is it that why are we so driven toward complexity? You know, you said it's sort of like, you know, well that seems better, but you know, we all look at our lives and say, man, I wish my life was more simple. Yet we keep doing things that are more complex. What is it about human nature or small business ownership that sort of pushes in that direction?
That's a great question. I think it can be a number of things. The first thing I come to is this inclination of, listening to what others have to say instead of like tuning into our own voice and really going with our own instinct and intuition. We have, I think, cultural demands. Demands from family, society in general that tells us to go in a particular direction. And I think we're in this amazing age right now, an information age, which is both, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because we have access to so much, but sifting through it is a real challenge.
That's good. I love that idea of societal norms. I think that is part of this thing. Is that's just what's expected, right? You own a business; it's supposed to be complex, and I think we take this either pride that we are aware of or not aware of when people say, "Hey, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm super busy," or "Man, this is really tough. This is really complex." And I think we say that begrudgingly, but I think there's sort of this pride element that comes from owning a business and saying we're super busy or super complex.
Yeah, that is on point. I call it the busy badge of honor. It's like we're expected to be busy. We're expected to be working hard. Oh, you own your own business? You must work all the time. No, I don't. But that's what we're expected to do. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what's at stake here. So if we continue down this road of increasing complexity, where does that lead versus where does it lead if we can figure this out, change our direction and move towards simplicity? Let's talk first about downsides of being a small business owner and just kind of giving into this demand for complexity.
Okay, so small business owner and giving into demands for this complexity, it means you get overwhelmed easily. And when you are overwhelmed, and I believe that overwhelm can come from two different areas. One is simply having too much to do. The other is not knowing what to do next. And that is a huge productivity bust. And you're not only not getting things done, not getting the right things done. And I'm also thinking, too, what's coming up for me as you're asking this question, I want to say it's Michael Gerber, the E-Myth Revisited, this idea of, expanding. When you have a small business, you're all the things, right? And I do think there's that pride. I grew up with this, that you're the chief cook and bottle washer. But
Right.
At some point, you either have to grow beyond that if you want to expand, or you have to grow beyond that if you want to simply have a life and be doing more than simply being that business owner.
I love that. I know that we could go down a whole rabbit hole for that because that's one of the things that I struggle with is what's to do next. And I know part of that is personality. I'm a 5 on the Enneagram, which basically means, I'm doing repressed, which is funny because I do a lot of stuff, but what do I do next? So I sit there and get paralyzed between what's most important when they're all important. Just do something. So that's a form of the complexity badge that I wear. So that's the risks. You go down that path, you get too much to do. You don't know what to do next. You get paralyzed by all of those things. But what's on the other side of this thing for people that have figured out the simplicity, approach? What does life look like as a small business owner for them?
Oh, it looks like that elusive thing we call life balance. It looks like being able to keep your business moving and growing and connecting with people and touching lives and making a difference while hanging out with your kids and your spouse and your family and doing fun things, those things that we say, oh, I don't have time to do. Suddenly it expands into that. I have the phrase of my business is doing less, living more, and breathing easier. And that's what simplicity does.
Oh, I love that. We're going to get into a little bit about how do we do this, but before we get into the how, I want you to address the folks that are out there going right now saying, "Man, this sounds good, but now she kind of lost me. All right, my business is too complex. It sounds like okay, this is utopia to think that I could actually achieve work-life balance. That's for everybody else. That's for the lucky people, or they don't she doesn't understand my business. So the people that are starting to go, yeah, I don't know. This seems like pie in the sky thing." What would be your message to them so that they kind of hang in here and figure out the plan?
It's not going to happen overnight, but the biggest thing you can do is decide that there is a way. That's the thing. Stick with me and we'll talk it through. It's about making one change at a time. One of the things I loved about your focus here on choosing one thing actually reminded me of the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. And that reminded me of another book I love, The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And then there's The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. All of these, they show you that one small step can make a huge difference. So we're talking about that in the context of simplicity, but I'm also telling you that has meaning when you're saying, can I actually do this? Can this be possible? Is this just utopia or not? It is, with one step at a time. So even if you walk away today, having listened to this conversation and making one small change, it will make a difference and you're already headed toward where you want to go.
I love that. So stick in there, people. Stick in there. Lisa's got the plan here, and let's move into that. So where do we start with this? When we say, all right, you got me. I'm going to take the first step and start to believe that maybe simplicity is possible. Maybe work-life balance isn't a myth. What is the first step that I would take?
The first step is to do inventory literally on what you are doing with your time. When we're talking about this, you doing all the things in your business or everything that's, comprises what it is you do to run your business, it's understanding truly what that is. That kind of leans into the time management side of it. But whenever you want to do something better, you want to leverage your time or your efforts better, you need to understand where it's going in the first place. So the first step is gathering everything. I have a background as a professional organizer. That's how I started. And I could immediately see the connections to the stuff that we have, the physical stuff in our lives, and then the stuff that we have in our heads and our hearts and in our calendars. And it's all connected in that way that the first thing you need to do is be able to see the big picture. Where are you spending your time? What are you doing? What needs to be done? When does it need to be done? Taking stock is step number one.
Okay, so that can seem ominous, right? For a lot of people, they can say, "Okay, I can do that," and they start sitting down and going, "Whew, baby, there's a lot of things I do, and to keep track of all these, or keep track and then record all these things, that seems like a lot." Mm-hmm. But I've gotten there. Okay, I've done the work. Maybe I didn't do it fully, but I got the work. I've got it all laid out. I've made my list of all the things that I do, and I'm like, oh my God, how do I get all this stuff done? Like, first of all, how do I get it done, and what's wrong with me? And now that I'm looking at it, now what? So, okay, I've made this great list of things that I do. Yay, me. But, now what do I do with that?
So, yeah, the first thing you're probably going to do is go, oh, wow, okay, it's no wonder I'm not sleeping or what.
So your family, look at this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And, it's funny that you should say that, because that is something that I bring up a lot. If you are trying to have balancing a life with family, which I do. I have 2 kiddos and a husband and cats, which that's a whole different story. But but when you look at what you're doing, engaging them and showing them, I mean, that's just as a side note, I think that's incredibly important. If you want to, you're trying to achieve something and you're trying to figure out how to have the balance, engaging people. The same idea would be engaging anyone else who might be on your team, any partners that you have.
Yeah.
Letting them know, this is what I'm doing. Maybe you have to check with them. What are they doing? Kind of comparing notes. But then really, and I usually say the first step of course, would be inventorying. But if you've gone through this, well done, because I know it's daunting to collect, but I promise you this data is going to be so important, because the next step is decluttering. And what I mean by that is looking at everything critically. And I mean that as, critical thinking. This is not judgment. It doesn't mean that you need to be frustrated or feel shame or worry. It's simply saying, okay, what do I do with all this stuff? And then if you look at it with a few different filters, the first one I love to say is to look at all the things that need to be done and say, how can it get done? Not how can I do it? It's one of my favorite phrases, because you start to open up the possibilities of still achieving. Well, the first question, I suppose, should be, even does it need to be done, really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if you've gotten to the point where you're like, no, it really does, then how can it get done?
So you look at it like, okay, well, I'm a small business. It's just myself, or I've got maybe a couple people helping out. Yep. I can't just ask people to do it, right? Like, I mean, it's just not magically going to disappear. So how do I take that first step and even ask that question of, does it need to get done? Because I think we all have this emotional attachment to our stuff a lot of times, right? Because we started this thing, or, it means it's what we do, and how can I give up doing that? Or how could we not do that? That's, my grandfather started it and he used to do that, and I think we have a lot of this emotional attachment to a lot of the things that we do. So that's part of it. But just even generally, how do we discern what we should do and not do if it's not blatantly obvious?
I get it, because this is your baby and this is really important. But I suppose if we step back for a moment, if you are looking at this list of what you do and you are living your life and you're running your business and you are perfectly happy with the balance of it, then you don't need to do anything. If you are feeling like it's all too much, you are overwhelmed, you are frustrated and tired and not sleeping, and your relationships are suffering, and you are missing out on aspects of your life that you really want to be able to attend to, now starts the question of, what do you value? And I know it can be a challenge. When you look at it, the other phrase I like to use is do it, delegate it, or dump it. And if you can't dump it and you are struggling to delegate it, and most of the time you're doing it, Sometimes the easiest thing to do, and this goes along the lines of when you're decluttering anything, there's a phrase called low-hanging fruit. Maybe find something that's simple that doesn't mean as much to you. If there's something that you did and it's a family business and your grandfather did it and it's very meaningful to you, that's not the first thing to address to give up.
Mm-hmm.
Look for something else. And the brilliance of this is that delegation doesn't always mean to another human. Sometimes it can be a system. Technology is amazing now in terms of being able to, run certain reports for us. You can also hire people per project to do things, even something as simple as now, the first thing that I delegated in my business was bookkeeping for a number of reasons. Not so much, interested in doing it, and it was very important. And, that felt like the thing that I needed to release the pressure for me. But it could also be something like a time suck that you find, like if you're creating graphics, you can go to sites like Fiverr, that's Fiverr.com, right? And you can have someone for very, very little money develop a few graphics for you, things like that. There are ways that you can just dip your toe in the pool of delegation and release some of that pressure.
Yeah. Okay. So I like what you're saying there as far as the different ways that you can do it. Mm-hmm. What about I think some of us struggle with just here's all the things I'm doing, and maybe it's not even a capacity issue. Maybe I can do all of those things.
Yep.
But I just know I'm doing them inefficiently. Like for example, and it'd be good to throw a few examples in there. Like I know I'm not very efficient in how I do email because I just kind of have it on all the time, and emails come in, and I'll be like doing something like, oh, I should respond to that. Oh, I should respond to that. And so I think for me, it'd be better to create a system where I'm maybe checking email, here's my 3-4 times a day that I check email. And I think that would be better for me as a system. So it's not even about removing, some of the things I have to do. So maybe speak a little bit about that, about how do we approach these things and in looking for ways to just do what we have to do in a more efficient way.
I like that. So now we're talking about keeping the topic of simplicity. When you simplify things, it doesn't always mean removing things, but sometimes taking fewer steps, if you think about it in terms of streamlining. And what you're talking about, the email is a great example. And I mentioned the term time suck, or time vacuum.
Yeah.
Email is a great example of that. Social media is a great example. And we need those things because that's where the marketing happens. That's where the relationships are built. So that's a huge part of what we need to do as small business owners. However, the streamlining comes from being more intentional, like you said, carving out certain periods of time. Now you're talking about an excellent twist on time management of batch processing, where you carve out a specific time. And I like to use the word intentional because it means purposeful. You're not like, oh, let me check my email. And then, 3 hours later,
right.
And so part of it, that actually does come from the inventory that we talked about, because if you go further with your inventory, especially from a time management standpoint, and you think about or actually test or time, the next time you go into your email, not even thinking about what you're doing, but just to go to check email, hit the stopwatch. And then click it off when you're done. And just see how long these tasks are taking you. And when you start to have that awareness, you can say, okay, well then I need to, the first thing in the morning, last thing in the evening, maybe at lunch, pick a particular time. And the other thing I would advise is setting timers, actually. Give yourself 10 minutes to check, and anything after that has to wait. I understand that when we start the day, we need to check for messages. We need to know if someone has changed an appointment. I mean, there are reasons that we need to stay on top of the messaging. And then you talk about systems for being intentional and to simplify. Sometimes it's simplifying what we do. You can say, you can engage people, clients, team members, and get them used to how you do things. I will check email in the morning.
Right.
If something is an emergency, please text me, or please Voxer me, or send a message in some other fashion, or call directly. And then this way, and again, all of these are like first steps that you build into a habit. And that's actually what I do with my clients. I do not have them email me, but I have them message me directly if an emergency comes up. And then this way I know that I can regularly check the email for standard messages or for appointments and things. But then if something else is coming up that's more urgent, and that's a great point, to start separating things important and urgent. I don't know if you've heard of the Eisenhower, the graphic, now I've lost it's like a graphic quadrant.
Yeah.
That Eisenhower matrix, I believe, is the term for it. And it's the idea of things that are important and urgent, neither important nor urgent, important but not urgent. And unfortunately, I think we tend to live our lives in the everything's urgent. And if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority.
Yeah, I've seen that before. I didn't realize it was called the Eisenhower matrix or whatever. But yeah, that's so good. And so when you've got, you've done the inventory, you got all the stuff, you have the low hanging fruit. And I think, that's important because those give you some of those quick wins and maybe gives you some confidence and some of those things. So it keeps moving. You do some of the batch processing, say, all right, maybe we can move some of these things together and be more efficient with that. What about like looking for big, when I think of simplicity, I think sometimes that's like, okay, I'm going to carve out a part of my business, or I'm going to actually, be more strategic about some of the bigger things. So how do you approach that where it's like, all right, I've maybe done the low hanging fruit. I've done some of the, I feel like I've done sort of the easier work, but now I'm still not there. And maybe I don't want to expand. I don't want to hire a whole bunch of staff. I need to figure out a way to get work-life balance. And here's everything that I have to do now. I need to get this down to half to 3/4 of that. How do I start thinking about that?
First thing that's coming to my mind for something like that, and of course, I'm coming from the perspective of the coaching side of it, the services side of it. So, it may apply to that, but I think actually this could apply to product-based industries as well, is to really think about niching down. And that's another form of simplicity. Again, going back to that thing we started off with, this idea that complex is more valuable. There's very natural and wonderful, mind you, I applaud you for this tendency to be like wanting to be all things to all people and wanting to make sure you have all the products or all the services and to be, really service oriented and to I guess, cast a wide net. And, from a marketing standpoint, it's not efficient. And it's going to make you do lots more work and not necessarily for the return on investment.
Yeah, that's an example of a personal example for me was, I recently left the corporate world a year and a half ago, figure out what am I going to do here? Okay, so I'm going to do coaching, I'm going to do consulting, I'm going to do writing, I'm going to do speaking, I'm going to do podcasting, I'm going to do strategic planning, I'm going to do group facilitation, I'm going to do masterminds, I'm going to do all of these things, right? And so, that's great, right? Because I'm all things to all people. So I just put the word out, hey, I'm great, come find me. First of all, they don't find you, but then you're like, okay, do I need 27 Instagram accounts so that, I can find so I can target the right people that I'm a speaker. Oh, you're a speaker. Okay. But I do coaching. And I do think, that can add to the headache of things like you're saying, even if it's that dramatic, or if it's, you have 7 different products or you have 6 different services. And now it's not just the headache of managing the clients and finding the clients and all the sales and the bookkeeping and all that. It's also the marketing and all of those things. So I think that's an important thing to look at is try to get over that fear of saying, if I reduce here, I'm not going to get it back over here. I think that's the misnomer. When you niche down, what I've found is that, wow, now I actually have way more clients because they know exactly what I do versus people that are just saying you're a generalist. So that's an interesting thing.
Yeah. And that simplicity about it also makes it easier for you because now you know the language to speak because you're speaking to a smaller group. You're very direct and you're saying this thing and they find you. And then it makes it easier because I call it the wash, rinse, repeat kind of approach, where when you have that down and you're like, look, this is what I do. This is who I do it for. And you have that down, you say it in such a way that people get it. You say it in a way that people who don't necessarily want to work with you get it and can tell other people who do want to work with you. You build your network easily. And here's the brilliance. The simplicity, going back to this idea that you had that it's not always about getting rid of something, but it's about focusing in, lasering in on something. If you laser in, you niche down, you have a specific audience, even if you have other services or other products or something that you might still like to do, you can expand on that once you get the client, once you get the customer. I cannot have a conversation about productivity without bringing up the 80-20 principle, the Pareto principle.
Yeah.
And so, so 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. If you take nothing else away from today, I'd love for you to take that one, because now you can start to think about that ratio in terms of 80% of your income will come from 20% of your clients or customers. And if that's the case, then focus in on the ones that you want, and then you can expand what you offer them. Then you can start the products and services. So
that's so good. And the advice that I received on that too about niching down was, when you niche down, also you'll have more confidence in what you're doing too, rather than saying, I'm doing 10 things. You do that one thing, you do it well, the confidence comes. And then as you have that confidence in that thing, people will start asking you, oh, do you do those other things?
Exactly.
So that'll happen a little more naturally. And I think I like this because it ties into your overall business strategy as well. Because if you niche down, you become a specialist, you can typically charge a little bit more for your services. And if you can charge more for your services, then you don't need to do as much. Like, this is part of the simplicity. I tell people that all the time. If you able to price a little bit higher, you can have less clients and still get the same income. And, it seems so obvious, but I think people kind of lose that in the wash, that if you really want a more simplistic life, including work-life balance, well, how do you have less hours that you have to spend in the day? Well, you could do it through less customers, depending on your model. How do you get less customers? Well, you can drive them away, or you can charge more, because then they're naturally going to, unselect you. But the ones that stay are paying you more, so you actually make it up there. And I think that sort of is an integrated business strategy along with this idea of niching down.
Absolutely. And at the same time, when that is happening, and that's brilliant advice, is that you get that practice of doing that same thing, whether it's a service or selling a particular product, and you're doing it over and over again. And in there is an inherent opportunity. Sometimes it happens naturally, but it can also be an opportunity to look at, well, how do I get even more efficient doing that? Maybe there's a system in place. Maybe now I'm seeing, we do these 4 steps or these 10 steps or whatever, and then you make a checklist. Then you have the checklist, you start to share it with the teammate, and they get used to it. It's like anything else, a habit or a practice, where when you're doing it over and over again, you inherently get faster. So now you are pricing out, some of those clients, right? You're making more for fewer clients. You're getting better and faster and more efficient. It's just all good.
I love it. It's just all good.
Yeah.
Okay. So what else do we need to pay attention to here in this idea of, we're trying to move, try to increase our simplicity in our business? What else comes to mind?
The other thing immediately coming to mind is authenticity in this as well. I think this sort of plays in with this idea of when we procrastinate or we struggle or things are too complex, that we need to pay attention to our values and if we're doing something authentically. And that actually goes right back to the first thing we talked about, is what are other people telling us to do? And does that make sense for us, our business? I love the idea of connecting to our mission of our business and making sure that we don't, that we're in alignment with that, to keep going back to that as a way to filter the choices that you're making.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. Like I can, when you have this big inventory that you've taken of everything you do, I think that's one of the great questions to ask is does this line up with what I'm ultimately trying to do? And if your answer is, I don't know, well, then you need to do the work of what are you ultimately trying to do? Yeah. It's amazing how many small business owners I talk to when I ask them, well, what are you ultimately trying to do with your business? And they don't know. They might have an initial answer. Well, I want to make some money. Well, how much money do you want to make? Well, the more is better. Well, okay, what about your family and, your work-life balance? Yeah, I'd like to have that too. Okay, and I think, but I think as you get done, okay, do you want to build a big business? Like, do you want to build, a big staff, or do you just want to make enough money to have a comfortable life and then retire. Like what are you ultimately trying to do here? But anyway, that plus whatever your mission is, what are you trying to contribute to the world? What are you trying to do with your product or services? But yeah, if you can't answer that question, but if you can, then I think that's an easier way to look at your inventory and say, if there's stuff that doesn't line up with your mission, see if there's a way that you can at least outsource it, if not get rid of it altogether.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, good. So what, as we start to move toward the end here, I mean, time just flies.
Yeah.
What are some of those things that small business owners can do like right now? What's something everybody can do? I know we kind of laid out the plan and maybe that's what it is, but are there some other things when we say, okay, the rubber meets the road, I look at this and I'd say, okay, I'd like to get started on that, but maybe I don't have time. Well, what can, everyone do right now today to help move their life towards simplicity or their small business towards simplicity?
First step that I would recommend is doing a download from your brain. Like the minute you click off from us, put a timer on for 5 minutes and take everything out of your brain that you've just thought about, that you've probably listened to this and thought of things that you need to still be doing. Because one of the best ways, and this is like decluttering for the brain essentially, that you can simplify and you can calm yourself and set yourself up to be more productive and receptive to all these things, is to take the things out of your brain. And I take that directly from and honor David Allen and getting things done and his system of getting things done. So he does the mind sweep. I have something called a focus file, that I do have my clients do. Same idea. Set a timer for 5 minutes and just everything out on paper. Your brains are for creating, problem solving, doing something more than holding information. We're not meant to hold information. Find a safe place to put it. And by the way, when you do that, that is not your to-do list. I think that's so important. That is the pool from which you decide what you're going to do with these things. It's a great way to clear your mind, have things in a safe spot, and then figure out what to do next.
You referred to clients, okay? So people that work with you or somebody like you, what does that look like? What they're your clients? Is it coaching? Is it, how do they work with you to get better at this?
It is coaching. It's one-on-one. I'm looking at some point probably to do more of a group thing, but most of the time it's one-on-one, or I tend to speak and do workshops. And the way that it looks with one-on-one is coming to me and feeling that overwhelm, feeling the things that we talked about, not knowing what to do next, and actually walking through these steps together, taking the inventory, stopping to think about what the mission is and what your core values are. And also too, and this is another important tip that you can take away, is understanding how you work. You mentioned something about liking all the things, and I think we have this in common. There's that multi-passionate kind of thing going on. And there's a great TED talk about multi-potentialites, or somebody came up with this term, and I was like, yeah, that's me. Loving all the things. And I get that, and that's a wonderful way to be. It's a lot of passion behind it, but being very clear and concise about the what to do next part, that needs some self-awareness. And that's what it looks like when you work with me. We figure out, your personality types, your tendencies. I work with, everything from the Myers-Briggs to, I love Gretchen Rubin's 4 tendencies, because that talks about how you show up. And, if you are an obliger, how to create habits that serve you is going to look different than if you're a rebel. And so all of that understanding comes from exploring that together and then setting up the systems and habits that make sense. That's what it looks like to work with me. And we do it in a way that is simple, because it's one step at a time. There was a phrase I came across that success is sequential, not simultaneous. And that actually comes from, one step at a time. That comes from Gary Keller in The One Thing.
Okay, nice. So, we've got this, who we position as the hero is the small business owner. Like these are the people that we want to see succeed, because if they succeed, their families, are taken care of, their communities are better, everything's better when these small business owners succeed. And so, we try to look at each of these different pieces. And I think there's a lot that hangs in the balance in regard to this whole simplicity, complexity issue. If they keep walking down this path of complexity and it just gets more and more overwhelming. I mean, there's just so many pitfalls that can happen, right? Eventually they can just throw up their hands, say, I give up. There could be physical, issues, health issues
Yes.
That happen. There's so many things that could go wrong if this thing is left unchecked. But what I'm hearing you say is, but if you can get a hold of this thing, be intentional about, practicing simplicity, that's going to turn around. You can actually reverse that and move toward a life that where you're healthier. You don't have the physical manifestations of stress as much. And things are just easier. Your marketing becomes easier. Your bookkeeping becomes easier. Your messaging becomes easier. All of those things. So there's a lot that hangs in the balance here, people. You need to figure this thing out. And Lisa has the plan. She's got a way for you to figure this thing out, kind of this step-by-step approach, but yet it's personalized to each person, right? It's based on your personality, based on your business, based on your experience and your emotional attachment. And I love that. So people, get a hold of Lisa or find somebody who can help you with this. So if people are going, you know what, I'm in, I need to at least get a hold of Lisa and figure something out here, at least take a step. How do they do that? How do they connect with you?
You can come to my website, positivelyproductive.com. That has links to lots of wonderful freebies that I have, ways to connect with me. We can set up a virtual coffee chat. It has a link to my podcast, the Positively Living Podcast, and the episodes there where I talk about many of these things. And hopefully we'll have you on as a guest as well.
Oh, that would be fun. I can be a case study for you because right now I'm a mess, man. I do the brain dump and that all goes into Trello. And then I've got like Trello lists of like, here's my Trello lists. And I'm a disaster. I'm in the middle of incredible complexity. I feel like I'm coming out of it, but man, I do need your help. But it sounds like you can help a lot of people. It sounds like you have helped a lot of people. So I would encourage you guys, listen to the podcast, go to the website, go deeper into this thing and grab that low-hanging fruit. Make sure you're lined up with your vision. Make your life more simple. I mean, look how relaxed Lisa looks. I mean, that's how I want to look someday.
Thanks. Well, it feels good, actually.
Good.
I'm walking the talk.
I love it. Well, any final words, any advice, things that, you wish you would have said, but I didn't direct the questions correctly or anything else that, our folks just need to hear from you?
Yeah, we could go in so many different ways, but really in the interest of simplicity, I want to encourage you to pick one thing, literally, that we talked about today and try it, and then keep focusing on that thing. And remember, one of my favorite quotes from Sophia Bush is that you are allowed to be I may be paraphrasing this, but a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. So congratulate yourself and celebrate where you are. Celebrate the fact that you're listening to this, that you're trying to do better. And it just takes one step at a time.
Love it. Great stuff. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Well, as we wrap up this episode, it would be extremely helpful if you would rate, review, and subscribe to the Small Business Podcast. Also, a quick reminder to check out the SSB community at smallbusiness.com if you aren't already a member. If you are a member, make sure that you are engaging in the forums, posting your questions, helping other members out with your insights. Consider jumping in a mastermind group or even getting private coaching. And if you're enjoying being part of the community, we would love to have you tell others. They can test drive the membership free for 7 days. There are also opportunities for you to promote your business on the website or through the podcast. Reach out to me if you want to chat about that option. If you want more information about who I am, about my background, what I've been involved with, please check out stevefredland.com. Otherwise, until next time, remember that your success is largely dependent upon surrounding yourself with the right people. So always make sure you have the right peeps in your Jeep. Have a great day.